Hey guys, so we are going to do our read aloud this week on a book from Reading A through Z. It is a book about the Titanic. We've talked about the Titanic before. We did not get into a lot of detail about it, but we do. I know that I've talked to you guys about how this was a really large ship and how it eventually sank. Um, so this story, hopefully you enjoy it. I have added it or assigned it to you guys on Reading A through Z just in case you want to go back and read it. So let's start. So the Titanic Lost and Found. It is written by Lisa Trumbauer. It is a non-fiction text, meaning that it is based on real events. It is something real that is being discussed. Um, it has a table of contents, which automatically also could tell me that it is nonfiction. I know some fiction stories have chapters. This just has a table of contents. Okay. Um, so this will tell us where to find that specific information. Like if we just want to read about the Titanic, then we could read about the grandest ship, or if we want to read about what happened to it, I would guess that where sinking would probably tell us where exactly that would be located. So let's start. It's a little bit long, but I'm gonna try not to take too long. Oop, Miss Martinez fast forwarded too much. Okay, here we go. So the grandest ship. When it was built, many people thought it was the grandest ship to ever sail the seas. Others claimed it had the biggest, and it was the biggest, and some people even said it was unsinkable. But on Sunday, April 14th, 1912, just before midnight, disaster struck. Within hours, the Titanic, the most magnificent ship of its time, had sunk to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Did you know? The full name of the Titanic was the RMS Titanic. RMS, guys, stands for Royal Mail Ship. And what that was is it would basically be a ship that would be carrying a lot of mail. I think at the time it says that it was carrying 3,500 bags of mail the night that it sank. So it's a lot of mail. And remember, guys, in those times, um, you couldn't mail things like we do now. Now you would have to like send it out and then it'd have to go on a ship. And so it could take about a week for it to get from one place to another. So it just depended on how long the voyage would be. The Titanic was built in Northern Ireland to take people and cargo across the Atlantic Ocean. Airplanes were still a new contraption in 1912, so the only way to travel from Europe to the United States was by boat. Um, so at that time, there were airplanes were just being developed. So they were just something new that were being made, and so really nobody had ever ridden them, and nobody had ever piloted them. So at that time, again, like it says, the only way you could get from one place to another would be by boat if you were going across the ocean. So passengers began boarding the Titanic on Wednesday, April 10th in Southampton, England. They were thrilled to be on what was considered the grandest ship in the world. It was the ship's first trip, also called its maiden voyage, and it would take 1 week to reach New York City. So the reason that these people were traveling to New York was because in the 1900s, um, there immigrants would believe, or even now people believe this, but they wanted to come to America to have a better life for themselves. So what people would do is they would get on ships, and these ships would take them to New York City. And when it would take them to New York City, they would land on a little island called Ellis Island. Ellis Island is actually the location of the Statue of Liberty. So when people would see the Statue of Liberty, they would know that they would be arriving in America. People would go to Ellis Island and then they would get off their boats. They would go in, they would be processed, they would look at their papers, and then they would either decide if they were going to let them stay in America or if for some reason they would have to return to their country. But people viewed America as freedom, just like a lot of people do today, which I know you guys have heard a lot about that. how people just want to live in America for a better life. And so this is something that was happening even at that time. So right here tells us that there were 900 crew, 900 workers on this boat, and there was 1,300 passengers, making that approximately a little over 2,000 people that were on this boat. 2,200 to be exact. So, so wealthy people traveled in style aboard the Titanic. They had fancy rooms for dining and elegant rooms for sleeping. First class rooms perched at the top of the ship and offered the best view and fresh air. The Titanic even had 4 elevators and a lavish staircase. People did not have a lot of money, traveled in less people that did not have or people who did not I'm sorry guys, people who did not have a lot of money traveled in less spacious quarters at the bottom of the ship. This area was called steerage, and the rooms were cramped and crowded. Steerage passengers were not allowed to go to the upper levels of the ship. If they were caught, I read in another story that read, I found out that if people traveled up to the first class area, there could be a lot of repercussions for that. They could get in a lot of trouble. So, cool fact here: a person's class was one status in society based on how much money he or she made. Upper class people had a lot of money versus lower class people had very little money. So in 1912, the different classes were separated. So how much did it cost to travel in the Titanic? Well, let's see, guys. First class, it will be 4,000. Sorry, guys, I'm moving because I'm on my bed. 4,000, and I'm a little. Okay, there it goes. $4,350 per person. $65 per person if you were second class, and if you were third class, $35 per person. So that's a big difference in money. What do you guys think? Yeah, I don't know if I would want to pay $4,000 to stay in first class. I'd maybe stay second class. I don't know. Okay, so let's continue. So at sea. After leaving Southampton, the Titanic stopped in France, then in Ireland, picking up a few more passengers. Finally, on Thursday, April 11th, the Titanic set sail for the cold, open sea of the North Atlantic Ocean. The North Atlantic Ocean, guys, is where the Titanic was sunk. The Titanic must have been a marvel to behold as it glided across the ocean. It was the biggest ship of its time. It was 269 meters, that's 883 feet long, that's about the length of 55 cars parked bumper to bumper. It was also as tall as a 10-story building, 32 meters, meaning 104 feet, and its 4 towering smokestacks stood 19 meters, that's 62 feet tall. That's more than 15 fourth graders, guys, standing on each other's shoulders. That's pretty big. Right here, it gives you like an image or a diagram, and it shows you this dotted line here. And what this dotted line is showing you is it's showing you the voyage that the Titanic took. So that's pretty cool. 3 days after leaving Southampton, the Titanic was well into North America. This area was known for icebergs. The ship's workers were responsible for watching out for these dangerous chunks of floating ice. That Sunday evening, the sea was calm. No white-capped waves crashed against the rugged icebergs, which would have made the ice easier to spot. And also the night was ominously dark and cloudless. No moon shone over the still open waters. So can you imagine there was no moon in the sky? It was just overcast. Um, just a really peaceful night. Then at 11:40 p.m., the crew and other passengers felt a jarring thud against the side of the ship. The Titanic had struck an iceberg. No one panicked, though, because they believed the Titanic was unsinkable. One person on board knew differently. Sorry, guys, my allergies have been crazy. A chilly discovery. So, icebergs are actually bigger below the surface of the water than above it. The Titanic did not hit the top part of the iceberg, it hit the larger part of the iceberg below the surface. So, when icebergs develop, guys, they build and they go above water. But what happens is the iceberg at the way bottom is a lot larger because that's where it started, and then it kind of thins out as it gets above water. So usually when ships hit icebergs, it's usually they're hitting the bottom portion, they're not hitting the top. We're sinking. That person was Thomas Andrews, who had helped design the Titanic. He soon realized by the way the ship was behaving that it was in grave danger. As calmly as possible, the unsuspecting passengers were awakened and told to put on their life jackets. Women and children in first class were ushered into lifeboats, which were then lowered to the ocean far below. People waited patiently for their turns, still not understanding the danger that faced them. So if you notice, these are the lifeboats, and they're being put down into the water so that these passengers can escape. Yet all too soon it became evident that everybody on the boat of the Titanic was in dire trouble. The supposedly unsinkable ship was sinking, and it did not have enough lifeboats for everyone. Resolutely, the ship's band stayed on deck and played music to keep everybody calm. Some people prayed quietly and waited for the worst. Others frantically grabbed the objects that might help them float in the water, and still others desperately clung to the ship's decks as it lifted into the air. So what happened, guys, is the Titanic was a large ship. Well, it basically split down the middle, and this portion right here decided to go up. So you had people hanging here, the rails, and you had people hanging on the rails, trying not to trying not to die or fall. In the ship's radio room, the radio operator sent an urgent message. Have struck an iceberg. We are badly damaged, the message read. A second message included the distress signal SOS. The closest ship that responded, the Carpathia, would reach the Titanic in several hours, but that was not soon enough. 2.5 hours after the Titanic struck an iceberg, it sank and disappeared, lost beneath the icy sea of the North Atlantic Ocean. Cool fact that it mentions here is that it's never been proven, guys, but there apparently was another ship that was just a lot closer to the Titanic, but they claimed that they did not hear the Titanic's calls for distress, and their radio was turned off, so they did not hear. Um, but people believe that if they would have heard that the Titanic, there would have been more people that would have survived. So that was kind of sad. Rescue. In the early morning hours of Monday, April 15th, the Carpathia arrived to rescue the Titanic's exhausted and grief-stricken survivors. About 700 people had survived in the few lifeboats, but over 1,500 had perished. 1,500 people died, guys. That's a tragedy. Most had not drowned, however. They were floating in their life vests. Most had died from extremely cold temperatures of the North Atlantic. So they were alive when they got into the water, guys, but that water was so cold, they basically froze to death. The world was stunned by the loss of the Titanic. How could such a magnificent ship, one that was called the Unsinkable, go down so quickly? Several decades later, many questions would be answered. So this is what the New York Times, the Post showed. This was an actual copy of the newspaper. Found. In 1985, something extraordinary happened. The Titanic was found about 4 kilometers (2.5 miles) beneath the sea at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean. Scientists could finally find the answers about how the ship sank so quickly. Scientists sent robotic devices to explore and videotape the wreckage. The ship's ghostly form appeared eerily on the video monitors, its front railing recognizable even after 70 years below water. So in this image here, guys, it shows you the front of the Titanic. This is what the railing looked like. I know it's kind of wood has all these things growing on it because it's been in the Atlantic Ocean for over 70 years. But this was kind of what the front looked like. Scientists confirmed that the ship had broken into two parts. But what about the hole made by the iceberg? Buried in the sand on the ocean floor, it could not be seen. Therefore, scientists had to rely on sonar waves of sound that bounce off surfaces. The sound waves helped the scientists discover that an iceberg had not cut a huge gash in the Titanic's side, as first suspected. Instead, the iceberg had made several small holes, which, when added together, equaled only about the same area as a doorway. In addition, the holes were higher up on the ship than people had thought. The smaller, higher holes caused the ship's compartments to fill very quickly with water, which ultimately caused the ship to sink. So if you notice in this picture, it shows you. So basically, the Titanic broke down right here. It broke in half. But these holes where the iceberg hit, it made these holes, and so that's where the water was coming in through those holes, and ultimately that's why it sank. Because of Titanic's many lessons, we've learned that new rules were applied to make ships safer. Today, a ship must have enough lifeboats for all its passengers, and lifeboat drills must be conducted so everyone knows what to do in the case of an emergency. Ships must also keep their radios on 24 hours a day, and the International Ice Patrol, an organization that keeps track of the location of the icebergs, was established. The Titanic was a grand ship, and her story is just as grand. The legacy of the Titanic lives on in the memories and lives lost, the lessons learned by the tragedy, and the changes that such a tragedy brought to sea travel. And here's the end of the book. It gives us our glossary so we can know what those unfamiliar words are. It gives us our definition, an index. Remember, guys, that tells us also where we can find information of specific topics. And that's it. So I hope you enjoyed our read aloud this week. Um, I encourage you to, if you want more information on the Titanic, to have your parents help you maybe locate some more information. I know National Geographic for Kids is really good. Um, and yeah, so I hope you guys have a blessed and great week. I love you and I miss you tons. And I will see you soon.